You may have heard that Microsoft made lots of changes into licensing models and the way almost all of the products are licensed on the 1st of October 2022. Up until now, it was pretty static. Microsoft introduced some new online services, reshuffled licenses around Teams and Gonzala. They made changes to product namings, but licensing remained pretty static since about, I think, maybe 2016. And then suddenly, everything has changed. Everybody is going to be affected by these new licensing changes. And, some of us are already affected by them anyhow. Only those clients, and I'll get to that in the end, only those end clients who don't use any hosting, they still affected, by the way, but we'll get to that. But not that much as any other end client or a services provider or a SaaS company or a large data center provider. Everyone is somehow affected by those licensing changes. So what's actually changed for end clients? And when I say end clients, obviously, if you're a provider and you're listening to this, look at that from your perspective. If we're going to start talking about service providers as a user, I'll try and make it palatable to you as well, so you understand why that change that affects the provider may also affect you. First and foremost, already on the screen, is from the 1st of October, any subscription license, any Microsoft subscription license where you pay an ongoing fee can be taken to any provider. If you haven't yet touched the bring your own license paradigm, and you haven't ever even thought about bringing your license, taking the license and bringing it to a hosting provider, then you probably don't know how complex that was. We'll go through a few very high-level steps today, so I'll explain to you why that's a good change. The other thing that Microsoft changed is Microsoft introduced bring your own license rights on shared hosting for Windows Server. That's the thing that was religiously always prohibited. Now it's not. Now it's permitted. The other thing, which is, by the way, you get that on premises as well, is Windows Server now can be licensed per VM. Why am I mentioning this in the context of a services provider presentation? Because now Windows Server licensed per virtual machine may be brought to a third-party data center by the end client that has that subscription license. And Windows 11 virtualization is also much better in two regards, basically. So firstly, again, Windows 11 can now be taken, licenses can now be taken to any provider to a shared infrastructure, which previously was very difficult, and I'll explain. For now, just please remember that Windows 11 licenses can now be taken to any provider unless the provider tells you, you know what, I don't need the licenses. I don't want to deal with that. That's the only exception. Plus, finally, CSP licenses that you buy through the Microsoft CSP program. Maybe you may not even be aware that you buy a license through a CSP program because it's sold to you by your outsourcer. So if you have such licenses, previously you couldn't virtualize Windows 11 on premises with these licenses. Now you can. So changes for the end clients are mostly positive. And when I say mostly, that's 99% positive on only what only one bitter pill, to which will come in the end of it. Before October 2022, the server provider, I call it server provider class system because it was really a class society. It was quite complicated. So you could be provider without any hosting agreement, as long as the hosting infrastructure wasn't shared. That class of providers had very, very limited rights to host and user licenses and even provide certain services. The second level were the providers, and that's the majority of services providers that host Microsoft software, were the providers with the so-called SPLA agreement, service provider licensing agreement. If they wanted to allow end clients to bring licenses to their data centers, to share environments, what's called public cloud. Public cloud, it's not AWS or Azure. The term refers to anything, any infrastructure, bunch of servers that run virtual machines of multiple clients. You never know when where that VM will be the next second. So that's called public cloud. Multiple clients on the same hardware platform. So if the providers before the 1st of October had to wanted to allow the end clients to take the licenses and bring them to that data center, they had to become at least a licensed mobility partner. But that's not the end of the story. Windows 11 and Microsoft 365 could only be hosted on either Azure or QMTH providers, a very, very limited club of providers. You actually had to work really hard to become a QMTH. It's not for every provider, and not even for every large provider. And then on top of that, there's also a division between listed providers and authorized outsourcers, which we'll get to. I'll explain it in a couple of slides from now. What Microsoft did on the 1st of October, that class system became more egalitarian, if you allow me that analogy. Because right now, all that difficult class system on top is simplified to providers without any hosting agreement, SPLA, and providers with SPLA, because that's the only hosting licensing agreement from Microsoft. That's it. Moreover, the providers without hosting agreement now can host licenses, and we'll get to that, how you can do that, even without signing an SPLA agreement in shared infrastructures. Why is it good for end clients? You don't now have to check whether a provider is eligible to host your licenses, because there are millions, if not billions, of situations when somebody rents a virtual machine from a provider, then deploys Office there, thinking that because, well, we have an Office license, we can deploy it anywhere. No, it wasn't the case. Now, as long as it's a subscription license, you can take it to any third-party data center, any third-party environment, and don't even think whether that's dedicated or shared. Again, positive change. But let's talk about listed providers and authorized outsourcers, because that's the nuance. There's a big nuance there. So who are listed providers? Those that are used by 90% of end clients to host the cloud workloads. The ones that are famous, the ones that are huge, the ones that we read about everywhere. And there's another term in the Microsoft licensing world, which I will mention every time almost on each slide after this. That's why I'd like you to understand what the authorized outsourcers are. So the authorized outsourcers are basically those who are not listed, not them. That's it. So we have listed providers. Why are they called listed, by the way, if you ever wondered? They're called listed because there's a list. There's a list that Microsoft updates. It's a downloadable document that says, these are the listed providers, these 4 names. Listed providers are not benefiting from any of these updates. And then the clients of the listed providers are also not benefiting from any of these updates. So that is a very important, the most important division. All the other providers, including large providers like Rackspace, what are the other ones? Private cloud hosting. We have a question which I can answer right now. So private cloud hosting is considered an authorized outsourcer. Absolutely. Anyone basically with a server. I could tomorrow here on my desk put a server, even like many servers, like a few blades, and become an outsourcer and host client workloads. We'll get to that. How there's a new possibility for small outsourcers. That's not good example. Thanks, Carl. What else can I think about in terms of providers? DigitalOcean, so service.com, anyone with they're not necessarily small, they're not necessarily tiny, but then even if somebody say has their own data center, and they developed a SaaS application, and they run that SaaS application in a multi-client environment. They're also an authorized outsourcer. So let me make this absolutely clear. You don't have to have an SPLA agreement to be in that bucket of authorized outsourcers. It's a ridiculous name because there's no authorization, like none whatsoever. It's just a Microsoft term. For some reason, they called it like this. So I hope you understand, because the rest of this presentation will revolve around that division between authorized outsourcers, because, well, it's important. So let's talk about the first item in the update. When I said you can now take any subscription licenses to any provider. So the nuance was it's actually to any authorized outsourcer. So listed providers are excluded from that update. They haven't got this. So in human language, first in human language, then I'll give for a few seconds, I'll put the explanations for geeks on screen, which you can screenshot. But I don't want to waste too much time, at least in this part of the presentation, on discussing nitty-gritty licensing details. If you have any questions about it, we can discuss it in the end of the presentation. So authorized outsourcers, whether shared or dedicated, as I said, it doesn't really matter. You can now bring any subscription licenses to any authorized outsourcer. It's just simple. It's just really as simple as that. And you don't need to check that outsourcer's authorization. You don't need to check whether they are a licensed mobility partner or, God forbid, QMTH. It doesn't matter anymore. And for listed providers, and even for Azure, nothing has changed. So if you still want to take your license and bring it to a listed provider, there's still a possibility through the old rules, pre-October 2019. So 2022, nothing has changed there. The only thing you need to remember, and here's when I'm going to put the nitty-gritty licensing details on screen, is remember that dedicated hardware unauthorized on the providers, is also very much restricted. It's also very restricted. So it's not like a free-for-all, bring any license to the dedicated hardware. Listed providers have been restricted from October 2019. But then again, if you already know those rules, they just continue being active. Same with Azure. The same rules, plus in Azure you have Azure Hybrid Benefits and Azure Windows 11 offerings, which is still there. They haven't been taken away. One thing here, I think I need to say this, is when I say any subscription license, I mean any license on which you pay a recurring fee, which includes all subscriptions from CSP, all subscriptions from volume licenses, and all the perpetual licenses with ongoing software assurance. So as long as you pay Microsoft a recurring annual or monthly or whatever three annual fee, you have these rights. You stop paying them, you lose these rights. So, but when I said nothing has changed for, let me take this back. So what's changed for authorized outsourcers? Let's now talk about the providers. What's changed for the providers? There is no more now requirement to become a licensed mobility partner and sign a licensed mobility addendum or even become a QMTH. As I said, you don't even need SPLA to become a hosting provider. Obviously, those who have SPLA is not going anywhere. SPLA is with us to stay. I don't know for how long. We're not Microsoft. But you can do that. If you want to drop SPLA, why would you do so? But you can. But certainly forget about license mobility and forget about QMTH, which never really took off finally. That's it. Even if you're not QMTH, now you can host Microsoft 365 applications and Windows 11. Simple as that. So is that a good change? We'll touch on the nuances. You may now host any subscription licenses, including CSP, which was not available until the 1st of October. So if you remember, CSP subscriptions could either be hosted on QMTH providers for desktop applications, and service subscriptions could only be brought to Azure. That's it. Now, any CSP subscription can also be taken to any provider. Is it great? Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There's a new authorization, and please don't be misled by it. We have an article on our website, SAMexpert.com. You can see the URL in the running thingy at the bottom. We have a dedicated article that explains what a CSP hoster is. Please don't be misled by the name. You don't have to be a CSP hoster to host CSP licenses. Again, I repeat, there's no authorization. CSP hosters are those who are authorized to pre-build and pre-configure virtual machines from downloadable media using specific activation keys. That's it. They don't have any other additional hosting rights. It's only the right to pre-build solutions. Simple. But there's a bitter pill there. In 3 years from now, starting from the 1st of October 2025, services providers won't be able to deploy client workloads on listed providers, and many do right now, deploy virtual machines for their clients on Azure and AWS. You won't be able to report licenses through your own SPLA agreement. So now you need to start strategizing for the next 3 years. And in this business, 3 years is the day after tomorrow. I spoke already to about 5 providers this week, and everybody's panicking. I told them not to panic. Things may change in the next 3 years, but certainly do not overlook this. Especially that affects software as a service application providers. If they provide services like their own solution and they host it on AWS, as an example, and they, for example, report licenses like remote desktop services licenses per user through their own SPLA agreement, right now this is allowed. In October 2025, those licenses would have to go from the AWS's SPLA agreement. There's no explanation now how that's going to work. There's no understanding whether that's going to be you can still get a single bill from AWS as a provider and then basically recover that money from your end clients, or they will have to have an agreement with AWS and get licenses, SPLA licenses from AWS directly. That is still yet to be seen. But if you do that, and many providers do, and especially those providers who've gone through a Microsoft SPLA audit, and then in the end, as a resolution of the audit, they promised to Microsoft to move some of the end client workloads to Azure, and many do, they will be in the same situation. So life for them will become more complicated. Sergey has comments around CSP Hoster. So sign amendment for CSP Hoster and follow CSP Hoster program rules. The thing is, that's fine. But then again, what I want to say about the CSP Hoster is, firstly, right now it's only piloted to existing QMTH, not every provider. It will become available to all CSP partners if we trust Microsoft's promises. However, you don't need to be a CSP hoster to host CSP licenses, despite the name. It's very important. Right. So please don't worry that I'm not answering every question in the chat. I will in the end of the presentation. So, okay, we named this presentation Microsoft Hosting Landscape is Changing, So What? So here's the so what. So what's changing in terms of good and the bad for the end clients? So firstly, I'll start with the good things for the end clients, not for providers. you get better choice of outsourcers. Basically, everyone. If you want to, you invested in licenses, they sit in there, you're not using them, for example, or they may be cheaper than paying for these licenses as pay as you go from the provider. Now you can take them to any provider as long as they accept that move. They may, some providers right now, we in all the private chats, there are providers who say, you know what, we don't want to host end client license. We don't want that headache. Some will, but then again, nothing stops you from the compliance point of view to take your license, subscription license, to any provider. You get Windows Server bring your own license, which you didn't have before. You have the Windows Server per virtual machine licensing now, which I want to highlight this for providers. It doesn't exist in SPLA. SPLA didn't change. So no new licensing in SPLA at all. It only works for bring your own license. So the end clients may take the license and bring to your data center a license per virtual core, per virtual machine, but you can't offer it through SPLA. Only through bring your own license. That's the only thing. And we'll return to this topic as well. And improved CSP subscriptions, at least in two regards. As I said, CSP licenses now can be deployed not only on Azure, but on any provider, CSP subscription licenses. And then Windows 11 and Microsoft 365 applications can also be taken to any provider. So if yesterday a certain provider next door couldn't compliantly offer you Windows 11 VDIs, now they can. These are all the good things. And simplified Windows 11 terms. I probably won't spend much more time on that, so let's just go to the bad things. 90% of you are probably already using listed providers. That's the kind of statistics that I found online. I was looking for it. And therefore, none of these benefits then apply to you when you host your workloads on listed providers. You may continue doing what you've been doing, or you may start thinking, maybe I'll move some of it to a different provider. As I said, there are very large providers that are just not in that list of listed providers. And the rest of you may be indirectly affected by the changes to provider terms in 2025. When I say this, again, this right now, in my understanding, if you've seen any clarifications about that, please put it in the chat with a link where the document is. We don't know how what Microsoft calls the licensing outsourcing will work from software as a service companies to listed providers. So if you consume a SaaS application right now, that is built per user and it's hosted in one of the listed providers, then if it really depends on how Microsoft will finalize the rules, the change in 2025, whether you'll still receive a single bill for your SaaS application, or you will have to pay two bills, one for the application and the other one back to a listed provider for the licenses that application consumes. I hope that will happen like this. So what for authorized outsourcers then? So the good things. No need for QMTH. Just forget it. There's a reason why on the thumbnail of this event we had QMTH crossed. We also crossed SPLA because we weren't sure what's going to happen with SPLA. Now we're sure SPLA is here to stay, at least for the next few years. Obviously, you have now, if you want to, you have new business opportunities through allowing end clients more bring your own license rights. You want to, by all means, you become more competitive. You get more competitive advantage to that. If you sell CSP, because that's a bizarre situation. So I know we support providers that sell CSP licenses as one of their business streams of income. And they also host something, but they can't, right now, they couldn't until the 1st of October, host the CSP licenses they're selling. Now they can. So if you're selling CSP, you can now basically offer a package service, something hosted on your platform, even on shared hardware, with the CSP licenses that you sell to the same clients. So you may have bundled solution. Is it going to completely replace SPLA? I don't think so, but it looks like an alternative. A good question, very well timed. What's your recommendation if a services provider is already a QMTH partner? Should we cancel it? You don't have to cancel it. You can keep it. What I would recommend you doing is, because CSP Hoster, the CSP Hoster program is piloted only in that circle of QMTH providers, you may go to Microsoft now and apply for CSP Hoster participation. Because other providers, we don't know when they will get that eligibility to become a CSP hoster. You can now, you have QMTH, by all means. QMTH itself stopped making sense. Because, well, you don't need it to host Windows 11. That's it. And that's, by the way, that's in the bad, because now you have no competitive advantage. Getting to the QMTH, those who have QMTH, they know that getting there is difficult. You have to be a tier 1 CSP. Sorry for throwing that jargon at you, but they know it's hard in simple human language. And we had one conversation again last week when the provider basically said, we have no competitive advantage for that. No, you don't. They said it. It's not. I'm not making this up. And obviously, the other bad thing is if you're using hyperscalers to host end client workloads and you buy all the licenses through the hyperscalers, that's fine. Nothing is changing. But if you are reporting user licenses through your SPLA agreement, you must start rethinking how this is going to work. Maybe even restructure the services you're offering. Maybe stop selling those end user licenses. So they're yet to be seen things, because some things are still yet to be seen. So firstly, Windows Server bring your own license, it does create a mess in providers' economics. And let me explain this in simple terms. I don't have a slide for it, but let me explain. I think I can. Right now, your profitability of Windows Server virtual machines, just the operating system, I understand that it's probably tiny. It's probably 1 to 5% in your entire turnover. But then again, profitability of Windows Server depends on the density of the virtual machines divided by the number of cores in the host. So you pay for that license for the entire host, Windows Server data center or core infrastructure suite data center, and then you recover costs by renting out virtual machines. The more virtual machines you put, and it's a simple division, the better your margins are. If then clients start bringing their own licenses, what's going to happen? Unless you deploy a dedicated infrastructure just for bring your own license, and I suggested one provider last week again. Last week was very, very turbulent, lots of calls, to basically isolate Windows Server through SPLA in a different cluster and build new clusters for Linux, bring your own license Windows Server, and Windows 11 virtual machines. Because that's how provider economics works. So we'll see, because not every provider. So again, another provider last week said we're not going to do that. We've invested so much time and effort in building our overarching cloud platform that connects all the clusters and data centers. The provisioning system basically provisions a VM, even we don't know where, it just does. And now we need to create a separate bubble just for bring your own license. We won't do it. So they will have to accept the loss in that regard, but maybe in exchange for simplified management. Still, it does create a mess. So the outcomes are yet to be seen. Maybe everybody will just swallow that pill. The other thing, compliance. So bring your own compliance. Again, one of the feedbacks from providers was last week. Oh, that's a good change, because now when we host CSP licenses, the licensees, the licensed entities are end clients again, not us, not providers. Is that so? I'm not sure, because if you're a provider, if you've been, especially if you've been through an audit, you know that you can be punished for the licenses that are brought to you without ticking every box through license mobility, because you're responsible for them. With the licenses that you hosted through QMTH, you know, at worst you could get your knuckles rapped. You wouldn't be punished for it, monetarily especially. But now, because the number of licenses is wider, and some of them correspond to SPLA products, so well, Windows Server, SQL Server, I can foresee auditors saying that, for example, those end clients that brought these licenses did not fill the license verification forms correctly. Therefore, we will assume that you're responsible for these licenses and will charge you for the entirety of your service period to that client. That's how they approach the audits right now, anyway. So I think with the proliferation of BYOL to every provider, now that every provider must start thinking about playing exactly by the rules set by Microsoft. So don't overlook the license verification process. Follow it, just tick every box. Whatever is written in your SPLA agreement, please reread it in regards to end user license terms and in regards to, again, license verification, which you must follow. And very few do, and they get punished for it. We don't think that compliance will be fully offloaded to end users. Microsoft make themselves a very convenient infrastructure right now with all the hosting and cloud licensing, when they basically hit the majority of the audits are Microsoft auditing services providers, big targets, lots of servers, big revenues, huge penalties, instead of going after companies with, I don't know, 100 users. So again, pure speculation. We are not Microsoft. We can't promise. But we think that compliance will not be fully offloaded to end clients. So be careful with that. And then the other thing, how will BYOL reporting work? So if you already have a guidance that you can share with me, I haven't found it yet. I haven't seen good explanation. Why am I so skeptical? QMTH reporting, for some it did work, for some it didn't. It wasn't, even in the latest QMTH, it wasn't really stipulated how that works. So it never took off in reality, fully stipulated and formulated and technically sound. So what's yet to be seen is, I'm sure you will have to report BYOL. How? We need to see. So, and this is a summary slide. So again, the impact really depends on where you are, in which category you are right now. If you're an end client without any hosting, you only have on premises, the hosting changes don't touch you. That's obvious. You're not hosting anything. However, there are positive changes like per VM licensing for Windows Server, which just saved one small client of ours $25,000. And it's a small client. It's huge money for them, because they could utilize the per VM licensing for their tiny cluster of 3 hosts. If you are an end client using hosting, the changes for you are positive, unless you are hosting on AWS, Google, or Azure. I doubt you're hosting anything on Alibaba, but maybe you are. Then in that case, changes are neutral. Nothing changed for you. Nothing changed at all. So please bear that in mind. So as long as you're using those 4 listed providers, nothing is changing for you right now. Large providers, here the impact is mixed. Why? Because we're summarizing right now. Bring your own license is more accessible, less headache. You don't need to sign all these amendments and addendums. But you are entering a more competitive playing field, where smaller providers now have the same rights as you probably before had to struggle for and get that QMTH authorization. Small or SaaS providers that use listed providers, we think the impact is negative because those providers, especially when you, for example, you offer a hosted Oracle or SAP solution like an ERP or something, these providers have never been involved in the BYOL game because they sell a packaged product, something that's built on top of the Microsoft infrastructure. They will need to re-strategize. They will have to start today. So if you are one of those, please send me a message. We can start that discussion. We are a consulting company, but to have like just a situational call, we don't charge for it. Listed providers are right now suffering. So why I put the offer full SPLA range to suffer? If you check what licenses, SPLA licenses you can get, for example, from AWS and Google, the list is very limited. Why? They don't want that headache dealing with user licenses. So AWS has started offering Visual Studio with remote desktop licenses recently. And I have heard a rumor that they are working on offering hosted Office through SPA licenses mid next year. That's the target time. Again, if we believe the rumors, this is not official. But then the list of licenses that you can get through SPLA is much wider. And again, the reason why they don't want to sell them, and they've been very hesitant to increase that list of licenses Microsoft licenses that you can rent from them through SPLA, is because 80% of the licensing headache on hosting are related to user licenses. I can understand them. They could offload it to their outsourcers. You're a SaaS provider, you handle the user licenses. In 3 years from now, they will have to either start offering the entire SPLA price list, or maybe find a different solution. We'll see. One thing I forgot to mention is the second item from the bottom is if you're a startup, the changes are incredibly positive for you because, well, before SAMexpert, in around 2005, 2007, even until, there was another business that I had, until 2013, part of that business was IT outsourcing, basically just, serving some subsidiaries of Deutsche Bank and whatnot. And we were dreaming of an ability to purchase hardware servers and just host all the clients that were in a specific building in a town in that server room, in that small data center, in that building. And we couldn't. And Microsoft was very hesitant to sign a SPLA with us because we were small. Now, there's no such blocker. They can bring their subscription licenses. You can sell them subscription licenses, especially if you're a CSP, and host them on your servers. Again, you don't need a SPLA. So if you're just starting there, if you have an IT outsourcing company, why don't you? We've come to the end of this presentation. So this was the kind of the final summary slide. And let's answer your questions, and I'll bring to the studio. Daryl, I don't know if you want to pick any of the questions, if you've seen anything interesting you'd like to respond to.
So I want to just maybe pick out something that I think is most relevant because it's come up a few times, Alex. So I'm actually going to ask you to answer it, and that's regarding everything to do with the new Windows Server virtual licensing. I think that's a topic that everybody's interested in understanding how it's going to affect end customers and how it's going to affect service providers.
Okay. So it's really simple. It's really simple. So I don't want to walk you through the pre-existing Windows Server licensing. Just mention just one thing, that previously licenses had to be assigned to the hardware. They still have to be assigned to the hardware, but it's a detail. and they had to stay with the hardware for 90 days. And there was no ability for a license to travel together with the virtual machine for Windows Server at all. So you still had to count how many VMs you have on the host, how many cores there are on the host, and assign licenses accordingly. And if you had more than 7 virtual machines on a cluster, it was cheaper to buy Windows Server data center licenses for the hosts, because Windows Server licenses would have to be assigned for the total number of VMs for each host. Very unfair licensing program, if you ask me, but that's the rule. That was the rule. So now, if you purchase Windows Server licenses, already have them with software assurance or through a CSP subscription, there are very, very simple rules. You have to have, that's the first rule, at least 16 single core licenses of that type in your entitlement. I mean, overall entitlement. So, for example, if you have no licenses like this right now, no subscriptions paid to Microsoft, then you need to go and buy 16 core licenses. You may buy one 16 core pack with software assurance. The second rule, again, very simple, is that you need to assign licenses. You need to count the cores in the virtual machine, virtual cores. Forget about hyperthreading. Forget about all these things. Just the virtual cores of the machine, and then assign at least 8. So if you have a 4-core virtual machine, it still consumes, say, 8 core licenses. If you have a 12-core virtual machine, then you need 12. So that's the second rule, minimum of 8 licenses. And then the third rule is, which I already said, if you're listening carefully, they must be on a subscription, either software assurance subscription or CSP subscription. Very simple. At least 16 licenses per client, at least 8 licenses per VM, only subscription licenses. And then these licenses may travel from host to host with the virtual machine. This client in particular has 3 hosts that I just mentioned. And the way the cluster is configured, lots of the virtual machines are static. This is such a thing, if you know virtualization, it's called host affinity. They don't move. And 3 of them move. So licensing that thing with Windows Server Data Center would have costed them a lot. But they already have pre-existing Windows Server standard licenses. Now, listen to this carefully. That's very interesting. Now, you don't have to actually pay attention to that rule, what I said, that you need to pre-license every host for all the possible VMs on that host. Cover the static VMs, and then the dynamic VMs cover with these new licenses with software assurance. That may be cheaper for you than going with the old licensing program. So obviously, the rules are simple. That playing with scenarios is less simple. That's kind of part of the IP that we have in SAMexpert. We assess those situations from various points of view, the purchasing channels, the discounts you can get, the existing licenses, whether you can benefit from something else, whether maybe it's cheaper to take this license and bring them to Azure. It's complex, but the rules are simple. I even managed to record probably a 30-second video on the same channel on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on LinkedIn, go to SAMexpert.tv. It's our YouTube channel. HTTPS SAMexpert.tv in your browser will bring you to our channel on YouTube. There's a short video in the recent, I think one of the 6 most recent uploads, where I explain Windows Server per VM licensing in 30 or 40 seconds. It's really that simple. It's not rocket science at all. Now, in regards to providers, SPLA didn't get that. So you can't sell licenses through SPLA like this. Sorry, not sell licenses. You can't license SPLA VMs like this, virtual machines. But if your client brings their licenses to your data center, then the same rules apply. So if a client takes 8 cores and rents an 8-core VMs from you, or 8-core VM from you, that's it. You only need to ask them to go through the license verification process. So you have a paper from Microsoft saying, yes, they have eligible licenses that will expire on this date. So you have to have that form. That's it. So on the services provider platform, it doesn't work for SPLA licenses. It works for bring your own licenses, BYOL license.
Alex, we've still got a few more minutes, and um, I want to try and address another. We're not going to be able to address all the questions. There are quite a few, so I'm trying to pick. I would say the most common, or the most that has the most common denominator for everybody on the call today. So I want to just read out another question, if I may, for you.
Hmm.
Um, this question is from Daniel. When I read product terms, I don't see anything which prevent listed provider clients to use Microsoft 365 apps, enterprise or business. What's your opinion on that?
It's not what prevents, it's what allows. So this is how licensing works, not only Microsoft, any licensing. You have to find where it is permitted, and it's not. I would even take it further. The way right now the Microsoft 365 apps rules are written, they don't even allow bringing them 365 apps. So when we say it's allowed, we rely on all the other Microsoft announcements and guides and videos and training that's already available from third parties like Licensing School. They all say that's possible. They have Microsoft authorization to say that's possible, but it's not allowed by product terms. You have to go through the kind of definition of network server, but that's so far fetched. So I'm very reluctant now to say that's permitted. So do it at your own risk. I think it is. 99% of me is saying it is, but not 100%. So again, it's not that listed providers are prohibited from that. They are not permitted. And by the way, it's not even written like that. So yeah, you have to be a professional in licensing to understand
It's
that.
understood, Alex. It's understood.
Yes,
It's not
it
written. Okay, like
no,
many other areas that are gray in Microsoft. You need to
I can
understand them.
explain. I can explain. The keywords are subject to outsourcer clause, something like that, and that outsourcer clause, and that clause
Refers to.
defines that you can't do it on listed providers. So it's not directly written. You have to jump through hoops.
Let's try take
Uh,
another. I want to try take as many questions as we can.
of
And there's
course,
some interesting questions. So there's a question here. I apologize if I don't pronounce the name correctly. Langlois Mateo. Is an end user still required to complete the verification form with
yes,
Microsoft during a bring your own license for
yes.
authorized providers? So the answer
Yes,
is
so,
yes.
so
Okay.
I know that the answer is, I said three times. I said yes. I know the answer is yes. I haven't yet seen clear explanation, and maybe Microsoft is. I mean, things are changing so fast right now. But yes, so they said it. Microsoft said it that they need to go through the license verification program.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Providers. So the other phrase that we've heard was and read: providers must ensure the end user has the proper eligible licenses. So it's your responsibility.
Okay. I've got another question here from one of our LinkedIn viewers, no name. If you sell CSP licenses
Yep.
and currently utilize shared computer activation to
Yep.
license desktop applications using those licenses, are you now able to deploy Office desktop software for users that don't contain SCA?
Shared computer activation. No,
Shared
it's still
computer activation. Thank you. Yeah, SCA.
it's
Thank
still a requirement. It's still a requirement in product terms in relation to Microsoft 365 apps. SCA, shared computer activation, is still a requirement. Well, first it technically wouldn't work. Uh, so please try me to explain very carefully how CSP hosting works. Even if you are a CSP hoster, even if you have access to the media to pre-build virtual machines and activate with the keys that were given to you by Microsoft through the CSP hoster authorization, you still first must sell licenses to the end client. You're not allowed to use your CSP licenses like SPLA for hosting of those workloads. You firstly have to sell licenses to the end client, and only then they may be allowed to access these workloads. So you are always either hosting using your SPLA or hosting their licenses. Please bear that in mind. You weren't given a right to use CSP licenses for hosting.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Let's try to take one more question. I'm just
So Alex Christoph, not sure what that authenticator is, honestly. So I can't even answer that one.
let's take this question about Windows 11. It's a bit of a technical question, but let's try take it anyway. In the time that we have left. So this is from Kevin. Do you know which CSP license we need to host a Windows 11 VM in an authorized provider data center without having a qualified end device, meaning Windows 11 Professional?
There's a funny thing about qualified end devices. So that's something I didn't want to cover today. So
Okay, you want to take it offline?
previously when you didn't have a dedicated, a qualified device with a qualifying operating system, you had to buy a VDA add-on license per user for those users that didn't have a primary device with a qualifying operating system. Now you don't. Basically, if they have any USL, user subscription license, through Microsoft 365 with Windows 11, then you don't need VDA add-on. It's just a user license. If they have a Windows client subscription, they can access VDAs on authorized outsources. Still, not on listed providers. So listed providers still require VDA add-ons. As I said, nothing changed for listed providers.
So, Alex,
Uh,
I want to wrap up today's session.
yes, please. Yeah.
There are a number of questions that we haven't got the time required to answer them. They are slightly more complex. So please, if you can, if we didn't answer your question, please send us a direct email, either to myself or to Alex. Our emails are on the web on the last slide, or you can just directly through the website. There are multiple ways to contact us: LinkedIn, our website, YouTube, or directly through our emails. I want to first of all thank everybody that's joined us today, both on YouTube, LinkedIn, and directly through the shared link. Alex, I want to thank you again for sharing this valuable information and bringing the Microsoft partners up to date, and hopefully this will be beneficial for them to be competitive and stay compliant at the same time. So again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Alex, and looking forward to seeing everybody on one of our next webinars.